Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Archives, Libraries, and Databases in Taiwan. This is the second webinar in our three-part series, Doing Chinese History in a New Era. This series is organized by myself, Denise Ho at Yale University, and Emily Baum at UC Irvine, and it has been generously sponsored by the Council on East Asian Studies at Yale University and the Long U.S.-China Institute at UC Irvine. We are also very grateful to our co-sponsors for helping to promote and support these webinars. They include Harvard University's Fairbanks Center, the Center for East Asian Studies at Stanford University, the Project on China's Global Sharp Power at the Hoover Institution, the Center for Asian Research at York University, the Department of History at Simon Fraser University, the Institute of Asian Research at the University of British Columbia, the East Asian Studies Program at Johns Hopkins University, the East Asian Studies Program at UC Santa Cruz, the Global China Center at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Hong Kong. Some of the presenters will be speaking in Chinese, but if you'd like to type your question in English, that's fine too. In total, the webinar should last for approximately 90 minutes, and it'll be recorded in case you can't stay until the end. We'll send out the link to the YouTube video in a follow-up email to all registered participants.
So as most people are aware, gaining access to mainland Chinese archives has gotten progressively more difficult in recent years, and COVID-19 has only exacerbated the situation. In last summer's edition of this webinar series, 2 of the 3 of our webinars addressed the challenge of accessing Chinese archives. So one of the webinars was on introducing digital sources for Chinese history, and one was on introducing collections beyond the traditional Chinese archive. So they included collections in the United States, in Taiwan, in Japan, and on so-called garbology materials, or materials that are found in unconventional places. And we will drop the links for those videos in the chat. So based on the responses to last year's series, we decided to dedicate a full webinar this summer to Taiwanese archives, libraries, and databases. And in this session, we are very lucky to be joined by 4 archivists and historians who will be introducing a few noteworthy collections from institutions including Academia Sinica, Academia Historica, and the National Archives Administration, all of which hold copious materials not just on Taiwanese history, but on mainland Chinese history as well. So let us get started. Today we are going to be joined by David Chang, who is an associate professor of history at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and David is going to be guest moderating this session. David was really crucial for helping to organize this webinar, and we would very much like to thank him, as well as Kwok-Leong Tang at Harvard University, for helping to put us in touch with our 4 presenters. We are very grateful for their help. So we will turn it over to David now, who is going to introduce our speakers, and he will also be responsible for moderating this session and handling the Q&A. So David, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Emily, for your generous introduction. Thank you for attending this webinar. And the reason I was invited to guest moderate this event, probably because Emily know that when I was in grad school, we were both at UC San Diego. I only spent 3 days in PRC archives, and I spent 2 years in Taiwan doing archival research and oral history. But of course, I mean, I have to admit, I did a lot of oral history research in the mainland, but only 3 days in the archives. So in Taiwan, this is really a treasure trove for people doing research on modern Chinese history. Or today, we're going to also, Dr. Chen Xiyuan is going to speak about pre-modern materials. So it's a great place to do research. You should really start your research in Taiwan, no matter what project you're on. Okay, now I'm going to introduce 4 distinguished panelists. All 4 of them are historians, and 2 of them are archivists. First, we're going to have Dr. Chen Xiyuan, who is a research fellow at the Institute of History and Phrenology at Academia Sinica, and he's also the director at the Center for Digital Cultures. And he received his PhD from Harvard University, and his research interests are archival research and Qing history. And next, we're going to have Dr. Xiaoya Hong at the Institute of Modern History Archives at Academia Sinica, and he is the archivist there. And he received his PhD from National Tsinghua University. Formerly, he worked at the Academia Historica, 国史馆. That's why we're going to ask him to also present on 国史馆's holdings. And he also taught at the National Taipei University of Nursing and Health Sciences and National Defense Medical Center. So his research interests include modern China, nursing in Taiwan, and archival studies. Next, Dr. Xu Fengyuan at the National Archives Administration of the National Development Council, which is probably, this organization is going to become the equivalent to US National Archives. That's my understanding. And he's going to explain exactly how this archive actually is becoming increasingly important for any research. And he received his PhD from National Zhengzhi University. And he is also an adjunct assistant professor at the Furen Catholic University and the Suzhou University. And his research interests include China's foreign relations, Taiwan's and international organizations, disease prevention and treatment, and archival studies. And he has published numerous articles and 2 books. One of the books is WTO and Malaria Prevention and Treatment in Taiwan. Another book, the ROC Government in Nanjing and the League of Nations. And finally, we come to our 4th speaker, Dr. Zhou Ju at the Institute of Modern History of Academia Sinica, and he received his PhD from Brown University. Right now, he's finishing a book on the construction of a trust in examination in China and Taiwan after the 1905 abolition of the imperial exam system, 科举. And after the presenters' presentations, we're going to have about roughly 20 minutes of Q&A. But you can type your questions in a Q&A box anytime. So probably you should type your question along the way. So I moderate the questions, trying to get all questions answered. You may choose to direct your question to a specific speaker or just a general question. Or if you need help with the translation, either in Chinese or English, you can type, please translate. I try my best to type out the gist of the translation, but not, of course, not the simultaneous translation. I type up in the Q&A box. Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to Dr. Chen Xiyuan. Dr. Chen, please.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity to show you the research and database for sinology in Taiwan. And thank you very much for the invitation from the Yale Macmillan Center Council on East Asian Study. Because the pandemic is occurring all over the world, and not only the state of international politics, but also the field of academic research has become more intense. However, the online database is still a good method for researchers to connect our knowledge, and Taiwan online database can let you access another new world. So today's lecture will focus on the field of digital archive, which we have developed in the past 20 years in Taiwan. As the current director of Academia Sinica Center for Digital Culture, ANCDC, in this talk, I will emphasize more work produced by Academia Sinica, as well as share some of my thoughts on historical research as my own research experiences. Before I begin my talk, I would like to answer the question, where are the boundaries of the technical skills used by historians? At a speech in early 2020, John McNeil, former president of the American Historical Association, said that in terms of historical research, the golden age of traditional documents is already past its peak. The new age of historical research introduced a diversified historical source and the research method. This may be a time to build our new skills, so I hope my lecture can give everyone some assistance on this point. So the first one is I want to share with you is about the Taiwan Digital Archive. The Chinese computerization lags the West by 30 years, but there's a 2 critical automation projects in Taiwan. So Taiwan was the first in the world to begin Chinese text digitalizing project. On the left, you can see the photo of the Sinica General Assembly in 1984, where they first decided to create a center for computation technology. The first material to be digitalized were the treatise on food and commodities. A database of historical, Chinese corpora After finishing this historical database project, the Institute of History and Philology launched a construction of the other full text database for Confucian text, history, philosophy, and literature texts, and so on. So Taiwan became the leader in the so-called Chinese book database in the early 1990s. Moreover, the database method of searching and using traditional archive caused a revolution in the field of literature and history research in Taiwan, and even impacting the technology all over the world. So this image from 2020 is one of our Center for Digital Cultures collaborative project, developing word segmentation and part of speech taking for Chinese, corpus. And there's only the pivoting from text to object. So beside the digital text, that began digitalizing biological specimen record, maps, archaeology, and anthropological artifact and image, etc. In terms of technology, we also began focusing on digitalization standards, metadata specification, and 3D modeling and database management. This type of high integrated national level digital archive project was arguably unrivaled in the world at the time. So you can see the logo of the past project on the left. And looking back on this period of history, we can see that although Taiwan arrived late to the digital trend of the modern world, it nevertheless quickly rose to become one of the pioneers of digital humanity. On the left are listed just some of the current long-time collaboration with SCDC, and we are always building new partnership. So this slide summarizes the timeline I just described so far. You can see that different goals were pursued during different time periods. So today, I have inherited the digital archive work of my predecessors and continue to find ways to seek new breakthrough. And we will take a look at the current project of SCDC. So first is the so-called building knowledge base, and to do the tool research, development, and maintenance. And we also encourage scholars from Academia Sinica to use digital humanity tools and knowledge bases to carry out a research study. And we also produce both physical and virtual publication, making humanity research accessible through a variety of channels. And SCDC has many excellent technical steps to research and develop tools to enable humanity research to conduct research in a new and efficient ways, especially when facing big data samples. So the following is an introduction to a digital humanity research tool developed by Academia Sinica Center for Digital Cultures. So there are two categories: text analysis research platform and image analysis test platform. And I want to highlight that this platform, this text analysis platform, also a kind of English interface. So there's an example of how you can use a digital humanity research platform. You can search a text of the novel, for example, The Dream and the Red Chambers, for change in the frequency of the work expressing emotional content. And the so-called image analysis system we developed will adopt the IIIF standards to cross-platform compatibility, as well as function for image comparison, content regulation, etc. So the Open Museum we developed in recent years is a kind of vital space that integrates collection, display, and application functions. The platform showcases Academia Sinica's research and translate it into a wider audience. My colleague, Professor Kusk, he gathered 20 Academia Sinica humanity and social science scholars on board on a project funded by the Rapid Response Grant on COVID-19 and the social sciences. Within a few months, the team composed popularly accessible science article. Following the Academia Sinica's launch of the reflection on COVID-19 website this year, companion books published was printed on just 5 days ago on July 15. This book features 19 articles by 20 humanities and social science scholars whose work contributed a very valuable knowledge to a Taiwanese society during this critical period. Now I will introduce the 4 Taiwan most important archive institutes as well as their most notable database. So you can see, some important digital archive institutes in Taiwan on the screen, like Academia Sinica, National Taiwan University, and National Policy Museum, and National Central Library. If you look at you are looking for classical Chinese text, again, the Hanji and the Taiwan Sinica database is an excellent resource. It was built by IHP to cover a wide variety of collections. Over the past 30 years, it has collected Chinese literature from different eras, including the rare books, the mentioned historical material, treaty, and chart. And we also had, the so-called veritable record of the Ming Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty, and the Korean Joseon Dynasty. So, for example, if you look for the information regarding eunuchs, you can see from the Ming Shilu that the Ming Dynasty requested eunuchs from Korea, and from the Joseon Dynasty record, you can also, find historical record of the Joseon Dynasty attributing eunuch to the Ming Dynasty. Of course, the narrative, the narration will be different and worst comparison. Academia Sinica, book collection, we put great effort to ensure the accuracy of the text. So you can see on the detailed revision highlight in the red scripture, Sinica includes access to the major Buddhist work, Taisho Tripitaka, so which I use here as an example. Now I would use an example from the region that everyone may be familiar with, the Chinese Wuhan. This historic building here known as the Yellow Crane Tower, Huanghelou, which is one of my research topics. So the Stricta Sinica database collects highly accurate text on the traditional catalog of the Jing Shi Ziji, and including Taoist canon and Buddhist literature. So we can find a painting and many other results in the database if you do a keyword search for Yellow Crane Tower. So we can select what field we can want to see through. For example, here, I can use the text 内文 and annotation 注释, including alternative character spelling 一体字. So we can see the results showing genre, author, title, etc. And we can also search the catalog directly by any keywords which is highlighted, which appeared on the text, in the text. So we can select different texts or even addition of the same text and compare them using the text comparison function. So we can even bring up the digitalized image of the original text to see how the original phrase appeared. Then you can filter your research result even more by searching for multiple keywords. So like here, we just use the single words, like use the Huanghelou and the fruit and the immortals. So we can provide a kind of text comparison function. So we can use the single word search, and we can use the 3 keywords at the same time. So we can provide with the comparative comparison function. The documents of ISP Scripta Sinica database are integrated with the search analysis platform. So we can directly search for organized list of names of people, place, and official positions. There is a 地名, 人名, and the 职官. Here I'll give you an example associated with the Huanghelou is Wang Enshou. So the document of the IHP Script Sinica can link and hyperlink to the database for official names, which is built in collaboration with the National Policy Museum in Taipei. So the database of official names, so you can see here. In Taiwan, the major databases that hold an archive of ancient literature are shown on this site. So they are, including Sinica, an IHP Digital Archive Online, and National Policy Museum database of rare books, and National Central Library rare books and special collection database. I won't go to the detail, you can take a look at it. And also, you can compare with the various kind of Chinese book database, which I believe everybody here are familiar with. Aside from the Suita Sinica, Hanji Zilao Ku, we could also have some important collections such as Meijing Archive transported from China. In the fall of 1948, and the tide of the Chinese Civil War was turned. So Fu Sinian recommended that the archaeological relics of the Institution of History and Philology of Sinica be relocated to Taiwan. So the Qing Dynasty and Meijing Dynasty archive was transported in a long route through Beijing, Sichuan, Changsha, and finally ending in Taiwan. So the archive of the Grand Secretariat, the 内阁大库, are put together by the Institution of History and Philology, and they collect about 310,000 items, including imperial decree, imperial edict, memorial, tribute documents, and etc. And so how important are the Grand Secretariat archive? I will quote a description from the well-known historian Fu Sinian. He said the archive, the treasure include private written account. The limited knowledge from official documents alone are unreliable to unveil the reality of dynasty. So all the political truths could be unearthed in this archive. So this is the database we built up since 2001. So in the past century, there has been, for example, in the past century, there has been a controversy concerning the ascension of Yongzheng Emperor to the throne. One of the key evidence of pieces of evidence is the Kangxi Emperor's Last Testament, which stored in the 内阁大库. So this evidence has drawn much attention from scholars in this field. So you type the 遗诏, the Last Testament, you can find the Emperor Kangxi's Last Testament. So this is the Kangxi Emperor Last Testament, which is clearly indicate the fourth prince of Yingzhen was his chosen one. We are also kind of Robin's collection of Robins at the Institute of History and Philology. We have a large number of Robins of variety dynasties and generations are collected, including Robins of oracle bones, inscription, bronzeware Robins, Han Dynasty stone relief Robins, Buddhist stone sculpture Robins, and Liaojing Yuan Dynasty stone Robins. So these precious Robins can be used to compare the literature passed down through generations to better understand the ancient Chinese history and culture regarding divination, sacrificing, mythology, religion, and so on and so forth. So this is a list of the Robin collection in Academia Sinica. The modern, of course, the modern Chinese history database also integrated together several Academia Sinicas in a smaller modern historical database and offer a convenient English interface. My colleague, Dr. Xiao Yahong, well, I believe he will give you details later. Here, I just use an example from my research on Majiang and Ma Diao. If you search for Ma Diao, you can find the result concerning Ma Diao, Ma Diao handicraft produced in the imperial court of the Qing Dynasty. If you search for Ma Jiang, you can see on the screen that the General Xu Yongchang left behind many records to play Ma Jiang during the wartime. General Xu was the representative of the Republic of China in 1945 at the signing of the instrument of the surrender of Japan that ended World War II, and he also the Minister of Board of Military Operations in 1949. Aside and outside the Academia Sinica, I want to introduce the kind of briefly give you an idea of the Danxin Da'an, which is a database held by National Taiwan University. From the document, you can see the relation between China and Taiwan during the Qing rule, which is presented as central versus local government relationship, as well as structurally as a center versus a peripheral relationship. So we can not only see the archive to learn early Taiwanese legal history, local and administrative history, and social economic history, but also to know the relation between the administrative area of Taiwan and China. So picture here is the archive record about the gambling fraud. So above all, the learning about Taiwan is not only to know the area of Taiwan, but also a vital introduction into the history of China. So we can see a relation between Taiwan and central Ghana all the time. So as a vivid map mergers such as this, we could also find even the database like Danxin Dan'an about the merger site shown on this map. Now, we don't have the speaker here to speak about the collection in the National Panelist Museum. So I just give a brief idea about the Qin archive stored in the National Panelist Museum. Because the National Panelist Museum database of rare books have recently updated its interface to make it easier to research. Although the registering an account is required to view image at high resolution, so preview images are actually quite already. So data field and the keywords provide also quite comprehensive. So we can again search the keyword like Huanghelou, Yellow Crane Tower here. So information from the image, the poetry, and the travel notes can be found throughout the database. So as for the National Central Library Special Collection, the platform requires a specific name or book or author or ISBN for research. So however, you can still view the few digitalized image from ancient books. Take the Yellow Crane Tower, for example. Again, if you can find the name of a related point or text from other database, you can use the information to search the National Central Library Special Collection website with a copy of the full image. So let me give you a short, conclusion remarks. While I'm studying various kind of the online open research in Taiwan, that research can still access this in a difficult situation under COVID-19. As a humanities scholar, I cannot help but lead everyone to interest in this world of digital humanity. How should scholars define themselves? In the past, the well-known historian Fu Sinen wrote in his 历史研究所工作子序, he said that we are not reader of books. 我们不是读书人. So we are simply search the heaven above and the underworld below, moving our hand and feel to seek things out. In the area of digitalization, scholars don't necessarily have to travel up and down the world to collect first-hand material or archaeological finding. Now, with a vast amount of digital archives and databases, as well as the meditation by digital tools, these things are themselves generating their own hands and field through AI, through algorithm, etc. That requires us to put together their connection in a structured and contextualized way. Furthermore, different research institutes must become able to exchange their data and the document digitally if we are to complement each other's works and findings. However, with the terribly convenient database, you may wonder in this new era, do we still need a historian, or do we only deconstruct, and manipulate the big data, masquerading as a knowledge in this digital world? And this is my humble opinion that in the upcoming brand new digital world, there's still a lot of unknown territory for us to explore. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, for this extremely rich, informative presentation. Good news for everyone. If you missed a lot of details, since he had to go very quickly, we'll email you the PowerPoint he just presented, so you can see all the links and all the detail. Okay, great. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker, Dr. Xiao Yahong of Academia Sinica's Modern Institute Archives. Yahong, please.
In February 1955, Academia Sinica established a preparatory committee for the institution of modern history and invited Professor Guoting Yi, a renowned historian, to serve as its chair. The initial work of the committee including recruitment of research personnel, formulation of a research plan, purchase of Chinese and Western books, and the collection of history materials from both official and private source。这样是下一章了吗？
是下一章。
这是下一章了吗？有看到费正清吗？
有
哈。John King Fairbairn with the Institution of Modern History, Academia Sinica in 1964. Let's to its Fairbairn. The archive was established in 1958, 3 years after the Institution of Modern History was formally established. In 1988, a building was built to house the materials the institution had collected. After more than half a century of materials collection, it contained important original history records and serves a major responsibility for research on modern Chinese history. The thematic files are the highlight of these archives, which contain continued from office records from the late Qing dynasty, unique the Republic of China in Taiwan, including files of the office in charge of foreign affairs, Yamen, the Ministry of Executive Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the North Government, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of China in Taiwan. The North Government files are worth special attention, covering the years 1912 to 1938. They are divided into 48 categories, according to subject matters. Important events from around the time China first entered the Republic year, such as the Box in the Trap. During the European War, Sino-Russian relations, and the special meeting on trade and Peking are all including. Economic files. The economic files constitution the largest single set of materials of these archives, and including the records of the Common Ministry, the Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce, the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and the documents from while economic operate after the national government retreat to Taiwan. There are important prior source material on the economic development of Republic of China and Taiwan. For example, economic files, Fiscal Committee archives. The archives are important modern technology and institution history materials. The Record Committee archives are stored in 3 locations: the Archives of Institution of Modern History, Academia Sinica, Academic History, and the Second History Archives in Nanjing, China. Personal papers, Dr. Zhu Jiahua. Over the past 10 years, the focus of our collection has gradually shifted from office documents to private papers, other than personal documents of those who prior had important military and political position and leading figure in finance and medicine. We also collect material of private institutions, NGOs, and groups, and any materials that can contribute to the study of modern history. Choose papers not only deepen our understanding of the Republic year, but also show light on the early history of Academia Sinica. For example, personal papers, we have Dr. Robert Lin. Lin was Lincoln. Lin was a singer, physicist who contributed grant to teaching and research on philosophy and playing a key role in the development of the military medicine system during the Sino-Japanese War. Lin's paper, including latest works and reference notes for planned research. We have also Gordon Lee, Katie Lee, Li Guoding. This paper about was economic professional in post-war in Taiwan. White River Control Commission project. The commission, not Huaihe Commission, not only use modern technology in water conservation project, but train skillful executives and interest who move with the national government first to the southwest during the Sino-Japanese War. The picture is the White River Control Mission Project. The White River Water Control Commission procured machine materials for hydraulic engineering project in the United Kingdom. Ministry of Agriculture and Forest project, based on the firearm of the Agriculture Promotion Commission House and the Archives. This project explains how modern China tried to provide agriculture during and after the Second World War. It will also add 1,000 more agricultural experts to the expert social network system, and increase its number to 2,000 in total. We knew a database is Military News Angel database. The Military News Angel is an affiliate of the Ministry of National Defense. Its military background gives it advance in produce headline news and viral photos, especially from the 1915s to the 1970s, when Taiwan was still under the martial law. By digital of all the news and pictures. This archive provides a vital platform for studying military history and international relations during the Cold War. We have many maps. The map of China provides maps of waterways and maps of the world others. Yeah. The archives website and email we visit the reading room how Monday to the Friday connection online is free. The other archive repository in Taipei, Academia Sinica。另外一个我用中文来介绍是台北的另外一个典藏单位是国史馆它著名的典藏举例有4个第一个是蒋中正总统的档案，第二个是 National Government Archives 国民政府档案，第三个是 Chairman 军事委员会委员长侍从室档案，第四个是农复会的档案那第一个是蒋中正总统文物的档案蒋中正是 important political and military， 这是政治军事最重要的近代中国最重要的人物。那国史馆在这方面已经全部都数位化，超过100万页以上的图档，可以说是除了胡佛研究所以外最重要的一个典藏的单位，包含蒋中正的文书、手稿信件、往来的电报以及他自己编的脸谱相关资料那第二个是 National Government Archives 国民政府的档案是国民党在北伐以后，在1920年代到1947年相关的国民政府是中华民国当时在中国大陆最高的行政单位，内政外交相关的资料超过7000册还有100万页也已经全面都已经数位化完成。那第三个是最近这10几年才 open 开放的是军事委员会委员长侍从室档案蒋中正他在担任委员长的时期，在1930年代开始，他就有计划有系统的要调查全中国的人才跨党派包含学者、包含社会人士、军事将领作为他个人的 personal information bank 个人的一个资料库那第4个是行政院农业委员会档案，那它最早是中国农村复兴联合委员会就是美国援助中国在大陆时期成立要援助中国在战后农业复兴，那后来到台湾来以后帮助中华民国在台湾可以说促成台湾的现代化，因为它不仅是农业方面的一个改良，以及乡村的教育、公共卫生以及节制生育、家庭计划等，可以说促成台湾的现代化，也是在台湾运用美元相当成功的一个 case 那这部分呢，这个稍后这个许峰源教授他应该对这个是更加的擅长。那值得一提的是，这个 CCR 的这个 archives 它全部都是英文的，所以如果是外国学者要来研究是非常的便利好，那以上是有关进士所档案馆跟农复会跟国史馆的一个相关的报告。Thank you for your attention. 谢谢。
Okay, thank you, Yang Hong. Yeah, it's such a rich presentation. Actually, from his presentation, we can see a lot of books actually came out from these archives, especially the recent new book by Inja Tan, right? And also Wei Sun, and also earlier book by Mika Mascherino. So I mean, also my own book benefit from this archive, the 国史馆 and 进士所档案馆. Thank you. Now let's go to move on to Dr. Xu Fengyuan of the National Archive Administration. 好，丰原，亚红，你要停止 share。好，谢谢，丰原。
那个主持人没有允许我打开视讯，可能要开一下。对。
哦，怎么开？ OK， 主持人是谁
？OK，
好。
Yeah。Good evening, everyone. My English is so poor, so I only can use Chinese to say something. 我今天的这个报告我分4个方面来介绍。第一个是我的自我介绍，那刚刚长城老师已经帮我介绍了。那第二个可能要来跟大家介绍一下档案管理局。那对于国外的朋友，档案管理局可能大家比较不熟悉，因为它是一个行政机关。那不过它最近这几年，它拥有了非常多的这个档案。那因此呢，我想以后如果大家在做这个中国史或是台湾史的研究的时候其实也可以来到档案管理局。那当然呢，现在因为 COVID-19 的一个关系，那我们档案局里面其实也有一些档案。它其实已经数位化了，然后等一下也会跟朋友们分享你怎么样去从网络上面来找这个捷径来看已经数位化的这个档案。那第3个就是想要跟大家谈一谈国家档案的这个典藏。刚刚萧亚红博士他有介绍这个进士所还有国史馆。那其实在台湾的一个状况就是有很多的档案其实它分散在各处。我举一个例子，就像外交部档案。中研院的进士所，它有外交部档案，国史馆也有外交部档案，但是档案管理局也有外交部档案。所以国外的朋友，你如果要研究有关同样的一个议题的时候你可能要做好几个这个功课。好，那第4个就是，当然呢，档案管理局它现在的这个功能，就像一个所谓的档案馆之外，它还像一个所谓的博物馆。所以我也会花一点时间来跟各位介绍，我们有哪一些档案的资源大家可以做应用的例如可以在线上去下载我们的一个相关的这个出版品。那因为时间的关系，我想我就赶快介绍。那这个是刚刚长城教授他已经帮我介绍了我的这个硕士论文写的是南京国民政府跟国联，那我的博士论文是写世界卫生组织跟台湾的这个疟疾。那我本身在这个档案局就做相关的档案的研究之外，就是做一些档案如果在教学上面做应用档案如果把它编成所谓的这个档案的汇编。那在学校里面呢，其实我也在辅仁大学也在这个东吴大学跟政治大学的这个台史所有上一些相关的这个课程。那目的是希望能够结合历史跟档案。那其实档案它比较冰冷，那怎么样它去做研究之外也可以来做一些相关的这个应用。我想我等一下也会稍微来让大家来了解一下那接下来我要谈一谈就是档案管理局。我想很多的外国朋友对档案管理局不是这么熟悉，因为它是一个非常年轻的机构，它不像这一个中研院的这个陈信元老师所讲的这个史语所还有所谓的这个进士所，他们的这个历史都有半个世纪以上。那档案管理局到今年它才满20年它才满20年，所以它的这个相关的这个措施还有它的典藏，可能各位朋友可能比较不是那么清楚那档案管理局它目前在新庄新北市新庄那我们现在的这个是在新庄联合办公大楼的1楼、2楼，还有7楼跟8楼跟9楼。那在这样的这个资讯下跟各位介绍，就是万一你以后有申请档案必须要来档案局阅览的时候就要到新庄。那不过我们跟美国拉拉一样，就是只要你申请的档案是数位档案我们就是让你现场提供，你就可以付费可以拿走。但是只要是纸本就像美国拉拉一样，你就可以用你的这个数位相机去翻拍这个是 现在在国家档案馆它阅览中心的拍照的一个情况。那另外就是我们有展览啊，那我们1楼是有常设展厅啊，还有所谓的这个特展厅。那常设展厅有很多宝贵的档案，好像这一张跟台湾息息相关的就是台湾的解严啊。那另外的就是有关于这个国际上面的，就是南海的档案啊，南海的档案。那这个就是现在引起全世界争议最大的南海的档案，南海的历史啊，南海怎么去解释？档案管理局拥有这么丰富的这些资料，如果你将来是研究南海的这个议题，你可能要来我们档案管理局调档案，或是从线上来看一看，我们已经有哪一些已经线上开放的这些档案的一些资料啊，这个是跟大家所介绍的啊，这个是南海的一个资料，我们档案局非常多。左边下面的这一张是清朝的官员到东沙岛去接收，这个照片已经超过100年。那右边是1947年绘制的南海的11段线图，那现在在中国大陆就是所谓的这一个9段线图。那怎么去解释它啊？我想很多人对这张图的解释都不是完全正确啊，你可能要回到当时候的这个档案里面去看，才能了解当时候怎么去画这一个段线图，而不是用我们现在国际海洋法的一个观念来解释这一张图啊，这个是顺带一提哦。好，那我们有一些展览哦，有相关的这个展览啊，那这些资讯其实都已经线上，我等一下也会跟各位朋友分享怎么去找这些档案展览。哎，你在美国哦，你在加拿大，甚至呢你在欧洲，你也可以在线上看我们的这个展览。那这个是目前在展的这个展览哦，有当初1945年日本撤退啊，日本退出台湾之后哦，在港边有很多沉船的一个档案跟现况。那有关于这个1945年到1946、1947台湾怎么样的一个状况，台湾怎么被接收的这个状况，除了国史馆有档案之外，档案管理局也拥有非常多的这些资料。那这一些档案呢，其实不是只有攸关台湾，不是只有攸关日本，也不只有攸关中国，甚至跟美国有关系啊，跟全世界都有关系啊，所以这些档案跟资料啊，它是非常丰富的。那另外就是越战啊，越战爆发之后啊，台湾就成为美国的这个所谓的另外一个所谓的这个提供物资啊、提供休闲的一个基地啊，所以有很多的这个档案，我们有外交部档案哦，有呈现美国当年在打越战的一个情况，台湾怎么去支援，那也有一些相关的这个资料，美国的这些阿兵哥，美国的这些大兵，他们在休息的时候啊，他们怎么来到台湾啊？他们的这一些美国文化其实影响台湾也很深啊。如果对这些美国文化在亚洲哦，或是美国文化在台湾，你想要进一步研究啊，也可以试试看来档案管理局找这一些相关的这个资料。那我刚刚有谈到档案局，它就像那个博物馆哦，所以我们有提供国中生哦，提供高中生甚至大学生来我们局里面来参观哦，来参访。那因为各位朋友对档案局不熟悉，所以我也多介绍一下这些相关的这个所谓的这个我们有一些介绍都要介绍的。那2楼还有一个档案修护的体验啊，这个都让这些学生们啊来了解怎么样去修档案啊，曾经的档案的载体有哪一些，甚至有一些我们现在已经用不到了啊，那就从这个展示里面呢让大家去知道。那另外就是可以带大家到档案的这个修护专区哦，这个在台湾是很少看到，我不知道在美国或是其他国家有没有经常可以看得到。我们就可以带学生亲自到档案的修护的一个专区里面去看，怎么去修这些档案啊，如何去保存这些档案。那这个是我们的7楼跟8楼的一个库房啊，那就是采取恒温恒湿。那目前的档案除了纸质类的档案之外啊，它还有所谓的影音啊，数位是那个影音的这一些资料，我们局里面呢都将它做最妥善的一个保存一个保护。那有关于我刚刚介绍的这一些资料啊，其实在 YouTube 上面啊都有介绍啊，那你可以去点开典藏过去结尾了，它是有所谓的这个相关的一个介绍。那你如果不想要听中文版，我们也有一个英文版啊，让全世界的朋友来知道档案管理局它平常在做哪一些事情，档案管理局呢有哪一些典藏，你也可以从这个 video 里面去看啊。那我想我今天因为时间的关系啊，就不打开。那如果老师们或是同学们想要更多的了解档案局啊，这里面啊 有一个7分多钟的介绍，就可以按图索骥来了解档案管理局它的这个功能，还有它平常在做哪一些事情的啊。那接下来跟各位预告一下，就是我们的档案局它目前是在新庄，但是我们5年之后可能要搬到林口去了就变成有一个国家档案馆。我们希望跟美国一样，能够提供更多的一个服务，能够典藏更多的一个档案，所以我们现在已经在筹划在林口在盖国家档案馆这个也跟各位朋友预告一下那这个是国家档案馆，在一个 YouTube 上面也有一些相关的介绍如果朋友们有兴趣也可以上去看一看。那接下来我要谈一谈的就是可能跟今天大家比较有关系的，档案管理局它究竟典藏了哪一些资料？我们每一季都有一个国家档案典藏新讯可以上我们档案管理局来找。那它大概就会介绍我们目前有哪一些资料像府院的政策的这些资料，就是有关于总统府跟行政院那也有立法院、监察院、司法院等等那所以可以看得出来，其实在上半部就是政府机关的资料所以档案管理局它成立之后它专门收集的就是有关于这一个政府各个机关的一个资料刚刚有看到有一个朋友他说他想要找一个海外的这个资料，你也可以上档案管理局来找侨务委员会的资料那可能有一些蛛丝马迹，你可以找得到这一个所谓的海外旅居者的一个相关的一些资料。那刚刚有提到的就是除了这些资料之外有关于政府的资料，我们还有一些产业的像我们的这个下半部有农业有等等的这些资料那这个就是我再稍微把它做统整。如果用时间来分，有关于1949年以前中华民国在大陆那除了禁止所有这些资料，国史馆有这些资料，档案管理局也有有国防军事有内政有外交有教育还有其他方面的。那有关于1949年以后的台湾中华民国在台湾的资料也有非常多像我刚刚提到的外交部档案里面，它又有两岸关系又有国际关系。那另外呢，我们还有一些当年的国营企业像台湾有很多的这个国营企业的资料目前也在档案管理局。那有一些产业的像农业像渔业的这些资料，你如果想要研究台湾这些所谓的这个产业的资料也可以来到台湾。那最近比较夯的，最近比较红的，最近大家比较关切的就是政治档案有关于台湾的这一个1950年、1947年228之后有关于相关的政治迫害的这些政治档案几乎都在档案管理局里面。那台湾它曾经被日本殖民过，所以档案管理局也有很多有关日治时期到现在的一个资料比如台湾的这一个铁路、台湾的这个农业还有地方的发展的这个资料在局里面也都有那我想这个简单的介绍一下我刚刚提到的教育的资料。档案管理局有很多中华民国在大陆时期的大专院校的这个资料，这个是当初随着教育部的档案搬到台湾，所以你要研究大陆时期的大学的资料你可能要来档案管理局这个可能其他地方的资料没有这么齐全。那另外国际关系有非常多台湾跟全世界各个国家的这个国际关系，像我自己研究的台湾跟世界卫生组织的防疫。那另外呢，最近比较红的就是东京奥运的资料我们也有也非常多那接下来就是我写过几篇的这些文章介绍，像档案管理局它典藏的总统府的档案这个局域，大家如果有兴趣就按照我的这个网址去找这个是看在国史馆的研究通讯里面我提到的这个当时候总统跟副总统他的就职、党国体制在台湾，还有国际它的援助。那另外呢，还有1950、60年代的这一个台海关系那还有就是两岸的这个关系。另外呢，还有政治的关系，这个是我在这一篇文章里面没有提到。总统府的档案它非常的这一个值得去看这个也顺带一提了那全世界各国最关切来到档案管理局档案管理局被利用最多的就是国防部史政编译局的档案有关于当时候1920年代、30年代、40年代在中国大陆的战场战局，每一场战争你要了解，你就必须来看国防部史政编译局的档案。那有关于军事的损失，还有在抗战时期怎么去争取国际的一个合作，国共双方的冲突，还有呢政府它如何去组织民防，还有战时的一个后勤救援、疫情的调查各方的讯息。 很多非常多哦，国防部人编译局的档案非常多，只要是有关于1920年代、30年代、40年代的有关于军事国防的这些资料都在档案局，这个是目前被用最多大家最关切的一部档案。那就举几个例子这个飞虎队我想如果对这一个中美关系有研究的老师们学者们都知道飞虎队，他在下个月就满80年，档案管理局也有这些资料这个可以来看一看中国当时候怎么去争取国际援助的一个脉络那另外就是有关于大家比较少疏忽、比较少去谈到的战时后勤救援的机制我也找到有关外籍志愿卫生人员在这个中国当时候的一个服务的一个情况，所以有关于中外关系，有关于所谓的这些防疫，也可以把它做一个结合这个是有非常多的这个线索可以再去做一个观察。那在台湾也有这个资料档案管理局的有关1930年代日军在中国发动细菌战的资料，可惜台湾研究这个人不多在中国大陆这个议题它非常的这个受到欢迎。在美国也有很多学者投入研究，在日本也是，但是台湾有档案，但是就没有人研究这个是非常可惜的这个也在国军档案里面。那还有就是台湾地方的这个档案，就是北投相关的这个资料，我想大家可以就循着我的这个投影片来看那另外我们有一些相关的应用资源像国家档案资讯网资源教学网那个我情报档案时光盒，那我就赶快来介绍一下。你如果要用国家档案，用档案管理局的档案，你就要上国家档案资讯网。那上面呢，我想这个上面都有一些解说我今天就带过那另外就是你也可以从这一个的这个里面去找国家档案申请 so easy， 你要怎么样去申请国家档案那从刚刚的这个国家档案资讯网，你去用关键字搜寻的时候如果有数位档案，你就可以在线上就直接看。当然呢，你也希望有一些还没有数位化的档案，你也想要看，所以你就必须来申请。那申请现在很方便你也不一定说一定要跑来台湾，你也可以在其他的这个地方，你只要透过线上的申请，我们同仁就会给你一个方便的一个方式。你如果想要再深入的这个知道怎么样去申请不懂的我的这个投影片的右下方也有一个 email 那这个各位老师或是各位朋友们，你如果想要申请档案管理局的这些资料这些资料你想要做研究，你不太清楚的你也可以写这个 email 问我们。那另外我们也有档案资源教学网这个本来是给国中生、国中老师、高中老师去使用的，那慢慢的也有很多的影像放在这个资源教学网所以老师们如果有兴趣其实也可以上这个网络去看它里面的也有一些相关的资料影像，我们也把它放到这个网络上面去那接下来谈的就是档案的国情报我们也在编这个电子报，每一个月有一期，那有很多的这个资讯都在电子报里面就像这一期昨天这2天才刚发刊的这个是谈到的是1971年台南的巨人少棒队到美国去打这个世界冠军的比赛。你如果对球类运动有兴趣的，我们局也有一些资料那另外就是有关于国际合作关防疫的刚刚常常有提到说台湾有台风，台湾的台风还非常多那台湾每当有台风其实的情况就会非常严重那最让人家印象深刻的是巴西水灾巴西水灾当年非常严重，那也有很多美国还有其他国家的一个援助你如果从这个档案里面就可以看得到，其实台湾那当时候的这个灾害非常严重，那有一些国际的一个援助那我刚刚所谈到了档案管理局，它现在有一些功能，它是像博物馆那有很多的展览那像这个我们有展过台湾的糖业，有展过台湾的这个地图也有展过台湾的这个照片那心想说在美国你怎么看这一些展览呢？其实我们档案管理局很贴心非常贴心，我们有一个这个档案的这个时光盒那只要各位老师对展览有兴趣你就可以上这个档案时光盒来看来找，都有最新的展览的一个讯息，甚至展览的一个影像我们都会放在档案时光盒上面。那甚至呢，我的这一张投影片的下方，我们曾经出版过的这些选集只要老师们有兴趣，这些选集都在线上都可以直接下载那因为这个时间的关系我也讲 超过的5分钟，我想我今天就简短讲到这边。那如果各位朋友你们有兴趣也可以随时写 email 给我啊。那就谢谢大家我的报告就到这边，谢谢。
好，谢谢丰源。Yeah, this is so rich, so overwhelming. I think people just say, "Oh, how can I keep up with this?" No worry, we're gonna send this PowerPoint to you. You're gonna follow all the links, just follow them, follow the National Archival Administration, the future national NARA of Taiwan. Okay, now let's move on to Shu-An Chu. Dr. Chu.
Thank you, David, for the introduction. I would like to also thank Dennis and Emily for putting the panel together. I also thank Kok Leung for putting me in touch with this very dynamic group. I appreciate this chance to share my thoughts about doing Chinese history with materials in Taiwan, and also doing Chinese history in Taiwan as well. And as we have 3 very informative presentations ahead, so I have the luxury to present in a less informative way or somewhat random way. Okay. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, so Taiwan or the Republic of China has never been unfamiliar for me. Nor do I see the Republic of China as something in the past tense. So the Republic is still ongoing. But back then, I did not know how relevant this could be to my own research and career. I did my master's degree on late imperial history in Taiwan, on Mingxing history. So I was attracted by the works of the very strong cohort of late imperial scholars there. Here, or Chen Laoshi, Chen Xiyuan is definitely one of the towering figures in that field. But only after I started my PhD in the States, I started to think seriously about the history of the Republic of China in Taiwan after 1949. At Brown, I entered the modern China field and worked with Rebecca Nadastup, my advisor, and she had already started her fascinating project on displacement of both living people and also dead bodies in mid-20th century China and Taiwan. So we read documents together, and I benefited a lot from her. Over the course of my PhD research, I did archival and library research in China, mostly the Nanjing Second Historical Archive. Library research in the US, I rely heavily on borrow direct, so I can stay in Brown and then just go to WorldCat and then order the books to be sent to our library, which is not particularly, don't have a very rich collection of East Asian books. And also at last, Taiwan. But when I start to write my dissertation, I found that the materials in Taiwan do not just support the existing research agendas. They do not just support existing research questions. These materials in Taiwan also change the way how I formulate my research questions, how I define the scope of research, and actually quite fundamentally change how I periodize the 20th century Chinese and Taiwanese history. So move on. So the question I came across was how to make sense of the Republic of China beyond 1949. Putting the Republic of China after 1949 into the equation can change a lot. The question we ask will no more be confined to something like the cause of the 1949 debacle, or how the wars aborted the development during the Nanjing decade. We can now ask questions like, how did the ROC, the Republic of China government, and with a legal regime that functioned, though with a lot of flaws and problems, for at least another 3 decades in Taiwan, despite the wars? Or did the wars in fact help to build and consolidate this system? So we can ask very different kinds of questions, and we have very different kinds of prioritization scheme. So sometimes I would call this the long Republican period. And at the end, I wrote a dissertation that spanned from 1905 to the 1980s. And nearly 1/3 of it is about post-1949 Taiwan. So from then on, I do not just do Chinese history in Taiwan, physically present in Taiwan, but I also do Chinese history in Taiwan, the Chinese history of the Republic of China in Taiwan. So that's why I choose this as the title of my presentation today. So for archival research, we have where Feng Yuan and Ya Hong have already done a lot of heavy lifting. So I should focus on some database and published materials. So the but unfortunately, and then I also see this from some of the questions raised by raised in the chat room that about where to find a hub or where to find a go-to website or go-to site to look at all these materials, at least get a sense of where these materials are. But unfortunately, the post-49 book collections were actually quite scattered. They already formed their own special collections. So I would, in the following presentation, I will look at 3 categories instead of using libraries as units. These genres of materials, I think that they give a sense that how and why studying the Republic of China after 49 in Taiwan is an intellectually promising field or intellectually promising project. The first kind of materials is broadly defined legal materials and then related to the constitution, the Chinese constitution in Taiwan. So as you may already know that the constitution of the Republic of China is drafted in Nanjing and then eventually migrated with the nationalist government to Taiwan after 49. So this is a very interesting constitution in many ways. So it's contained a very peculiar 5-power system designed by Sun Yat-sen. So under this system, there are two powers outside of the traditional 3-power system. So we have the examination power and control power, which modeled called the control power, which modeled after the Yushi, the census system from Imperial China. So there are quite a lot of problems and difficulties created by this constitution, not only because this is a Chinese constitution made in China and then taken to Taiwan, but because of this peculiar system of 5-power system, this 5-power constitution. So to deal with these problems, so we have a long list of interpretations by justice of the judicial yuan, so the judicial branch of the Republic of China's government. So there's a database. So it's something it may be something quite beginner's level, but I still find it very intellectually stimulating to look at these interpretations. It covers not only those constitutional level kind of problems like territory or like the definition of who is or who is not civil servant, because that's quite problematic things under the system of examination power. But you can also see a lot of very interesting and everyday life things in these interpretations, including the regulations over adoption of children in civic law, and then the licensing of medical practitioners, so on and so forth. There's quite a lot of different things in these interpretations, and then these are all openly accessible online, and then you can see the hyperlink here, and also draw attention to another system which is also from the judicial yuan, the judicial branch of the ROC government, and then this is called judicial yuan law and regulations retrieving system. So there's quite a wealth of materials in it. They have cases and then completely searchable, but although after they have updated their system, unfortunately, the search engine become less sensible than I used it 2 or 3 years ago. But still, there's quite a lot can be found in these 2 sites, these 2 databases, and then these draw attention to the specific or peculiar legal issues raised emerged after 49 in Taiwan because of our Republic of China system. So I will just walk you through the 大法官解释, the justice interpretations. So from 1949 to present, there are in total 805 interpretations. So you can access them in full text from this website, through this website. And then they also have English version, but if I remember correctly, they have translation of 600-ish of these interpretations. So I think that's and then there's a lot of quite interesting materials in these interpretations. And then for me, if you want to look for some topics and then broadly related to China and Taiwan over the 20th century, sometimes this can be quite rewarding to take a look at these interpretations, as well as and also the judicial experience website as well. Okay, I'll move on to another kind of materials or another genre of materials. So the Tongxianghui Wenxian, which is publication of native praise associations. So native praise associations have been a phenomenon in modern Chinese, in late imperial and modern Chinese history, but the publication of native praise associations actually proliferated after 49, and in the format of magazine, and they usually use a title like something, a particular province, and then Wenxian. In this example, Hubei Wenxian. So these materials, actually, this Tongxianghui is actually some kind of institutions that shape and also reproduce identities, Chinese identities after 49, quite important in this sense. So look how, where to find these kind of materials, I'll draw attention to 国家图书馆, the National Central Library. They have a 期刊文献资讯网, which is the database of Taiwan periodicals. So back in the days, I love the function of browse by issue of this 国家图书馆期刊文献资讯网, but sadly, their recent renovation or the recent updates of their system, they cancel this function, so you cannot just press the particular issue of a particular periodical and then find the titles of the. At least you can have a look at the titles of the articles, but you cannot do it anymore. But still, 国家图书馆期刊文献资讯网, if you want to look, if you know what to look for, and if you know something about the keywords, about the titles of the kind of periodicals you want to look for, still is the go-to database. This still is a database to go to first before you do further research. And then I also know that there's a recent 资料库 constructed by mainland China company. So it's called Taiwan 大陆同乡会文献资料库. So they provide partial it requires subscription, but you can partially access to the table of contents of these magazines through this database. And then so I watched one of the YouTube videos of the last series, and then I think that was Jeremy Brown. He walked us through the Confuzi website about how to use auction websites to conduct preliminary research with materials, especially post-49 materials. So I also think that this also works well with Taiwanese materials after 49. So auctions websites in Taiwan, you have Rutian, you also have Yahoo, Paimai. Those are auction websites. Actually, you can find quite a lot of good stuff there. So then I'll also walk you through one of the issues of this Hubei Wenxian, give you a sense of what it looked like in these kind of magazines published by native praise associations. So as you can see, it's not always informative for historians. So it provides a lot of anecdotes, a lot of personal recollections. They may not be first-hand experience, first-hand materials, but sometimes they provide a lot of unexpected help for researchers. But I personally find the biographies most helpful in this category, in this genre of native praise association magazines. So you can see at the bottom, you have seen Ai Wei先生传略, a biography of Ai Wei. Ai Wei is not a very famous scholar, but actually he played a very important part in the introduction of IQ tests and standardized tests into China and Taiwan. And then his career spanned from mainland to Taiwan. So he's for my own research, he's quite important. But he's quite an obscure person, so you cannot find it's difficult to find his biography or biographical information. But this issue of the Hubei Wenxian saved me. So sometimes you can see biographies, a lot of very interesting and important people from this native praise magazines. And then that's can be extremely useful for researchers. And then for modern, I'm not sure if that's true for other modern Chinese scholars, but for me who work from late imperial period to modern period, I find that sometimes it's difficult to find a stable pool of biographies for figures, for individuals in the modern period. So in the Mingqing period, we have those go-to source books. We have the Dictionary of Bing biography. We have the for the Mingqing text, we have the Xianzheng Lu, we have the Beizhuanji, we have those kind of regular source book or tool book to go to. Or later the Zhou Junfu's Mingqing Ren Zhuan Zhi Jiao Shuoying. We have those kind, or later we have the Chen Wei Renmin Chen Wei Xitong constructed by the Xu Shuo. But for modern historians, it's sometimes difficult to locate someone, especially some obscure person. Biographical information. So I think that the Native Place Association magazine maybe it can provide some help in this regard. Okay, then I'll move on to the third kind of materials I find very interesting, and then tells us a lot of the intellectual promise about doing Chinese history after 49 in Taiwan. So it's called the Feiqing Yanjiu, or literally translated as research on communist bandits. So this is also, for obvious reason, this is also a genre which proliferated after 49. So unfortunately, these kind of materials or these kind of books are not very, we do not have very focused, specialized collection of this. But the good thing is that in the Gordon E library of my home institution, the IMH Institute of Modern History, we have a section with a 00 section in this library. That's a small room on the first floor of the Gordon E library. You can see nearly all these Feiqing Yanjiu related books stored in that room. So that's quite helpful if someone have the chance to look at have the chance to visit Gordon Library. It can be quite rewarding to browse through the stack, and then sometimes it's provide a lot of inspiration just to browse through the stacks instead of directly using the database. Another place for this kind of another hub for this kind of Feiqing Yanjiu materials, I think that it should be the libraries of National Chengchi University. Zhengda had been one of the center for Feiqing Yanjiu or Zhongguo Yanjiu for a very long time. So they have a lot of this kind of materials. But unfortunately, those materials are stored in different libraries, different Fenguan in Zhengda. So you have to have a sense of what to look for before going there. So these are the two places I can think about if you want to situate or want to locate Feiqing Yanjiu materials. Again, I recommend going to auction websites and then to do preliminary research, like going to the Confuzi to look for materials, post-49 materials, or at least have a sense of what it looked like before further research, because there's quite a lot of things put online and to be sold these days. And then the sellers often provide pictures, a table of contents that can be helpful by itself, no matter you purchase it or not. So I also recommend going to auction websites, and then if you want to look for this kind of Feiqing Yanjiu materials. Once again, these Feiqing Yanjiu materials are not something can be used as first-hand materials especially on PRC history. But for me, they're extremely useful to reconstruct the information circuit between ROC, Republic of China, and PRC, two ideologically or politically confronting regimes. They're supposed to be detached from each other during the Cold War. But if you look closer at these Feiqing Yanjiu materials, you can still see there's an information circuit working over the Cold War. So this is something I'm very interested in. And then in one of my recent side projects, I look at the simplification character project in Taiwan. So usually we think that Taiwan used traditional characters, Chinese characters, and then the PRC, they have their simplified characters. But actually, there's a lot of ongoing efforts to simplify or to introduce simplified characters in Taiwan over the 50s, 60s, and 70s during the so-called authoritarian rule. So that's quite strange. And then actually, there's a lot of common ground between the intellectuals in Taiwan and then in mainland China in terms of simplified characters. So this is something I read from Wang Shijie diary, and then he read this 北秦研究 book, and then he didn't just read it as a condemnation of the way the communist bandits destroy Chinese culture in China, but actually he took it very seriously. He took those information in these books seriously as possible projects or alternative projects to simplify Chinese characters. And then these projects can give resource to him to think about the way characters can be simplified in Taiwan. So that's something quite counterintuitive. They're not confronting with each other. Actually, they borrow intellectual resources from each other. So Wang Shijie has a long history, as I cite here, has a long history of doing simplification since the days in mainland. So he has ongoing interest for the simplification of Chinese characters, even after moving to Taiwan after 49. So that's something I find quite interesting. And that's something I also find useful in this kind of 北秦研究 materials. Okay, so time is running short, so I will end my presentation with a piece of material that I find interesting recently. And this material itself tells a story about how books, not just people migrate, but also how books and then migrate, and how the reproduction and then how the reproduction of books can tell stories about the Republic of China in Taiwan after 49. Okay, the book I'm dealing with is called 中国社会之史的分析, a historical analysis of the Chinese society, by Tao Xisheng. Tao Xisheng, as you may know, he's a very famous politician and also scholar. He's the founder of the so-called Shihuo School of Social History and Economic History. He has a lot of influence in post-war Taiwan, both pre-49 mainland Chinese historiography. Also, is also a strong influence over people, scholars, historians in the academic in Taiwan after 49. So this is one of his.
1 minute.
I have 1 minute left.
Up. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just wrap up. Okay, so this is a book written by him. So we have the Taipei edition, and then we also have the Beijing edition. But if you just look at the Beijing edition, you'll miss a lot of things here, which is, first, this is a book. When Tao Xisheng wanted to republish his book, he didn't have a copy with him in the 50s. So he borrowed one from the Taida collection. And then the Taida collection actually got from the Taihoku Imperial University collection. So this collection was acquired, this book was acquired maybe in the 20s or 30s by the DIDA, the Imperial Universities. So that's quite interesting. For someone, the author himself lost the original copy, but he retrieved this copy from from an so-called enemy collection. And then actually this collection, I think the most important takeaway is that this book, this copy, is completely accessible through the Taiwan ebook database. So you can see on the right-hand, top right corner, you see the seal of the Taipei DIDA Taihoku Imperial University. So that's quite interesting for me, because usually if you want, you assume that you have to go into the special collection to look for this number of banben of editions. But sometimes if you browse through this database, I think that's the Taiwan ebook database is quite a generous database. It provides a lot of very useful and very valuable books, and then with high resolution upload completely online. So this is one of the examples. So this book also tells a lot of stories, but I don't have time to. The republication of this book, actually, I think that's quite interesting, but I don't have time to move on. But just give me 1 more minute for the final wrap up. So the point I want to make with these materials and Tao Xisheng's book is that, so the text the books, the materials in Taiwan, they not just provide alternatives, choices of materials to do Chinese history, but also they significantly change the way we frame our questions about Chinese history, and then change the way we periodize, change the scope of doing Chinese history. So I think that it will be very rewarding to look into the stories of these books, why and how they eventually exist in Taiwan, and then they can bring that can be very intellectually rewarding. So that's my most general point I want to make with this presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you, Dr. Chu, for your thoughtful reflection. Now we're a little over time, so we just over now 9:05. We have 5 minutes left for Q&A, but we're going to do it very quickly. Because some of the questions have been answered in the chat in the Q&A box. You can look at them, and the remaining questions, I think there are around a few themes. Number one, I think Xuan also mentioned this. And Madeline Dong Yue asked this question: is there a central platform or convenient clearinghouse with links to all archives, and which also shows which ones are we can access online？ 就说台湾有没有一个中心的一个网站可以看到所有的档案馆？应该是没有吧？诸位，各位 panelists， 你可以 turn on your video and your audio。丰原、雅红、陈老师。Hello。
OK。
台湾有没有这样一个中心的一个网站，我们看到所有的这个档案馆再集中在一起？应该是没有，对吧
？Yeah, not exactly. That's a very similar question to Spencer's question, which I answered. Like, is there a kind of reference site or indexing websites for compiling all the digital database? As a matter of fact, there's a kind of so-called Taiwan Union Catalog, the so-called TAIEUC, which I put in my answer to Lou Spencer's question. It is a kind of portal to Taiwan database. So this is so-called Digital Taiwan. So you can use the Digital Taiwan. It's kind of Taiwan Dianchang. It's kind of researchable showcase platform, built by my center. So it's kind of browsable catalog, and you can know about all the digital knowledge bases about Taiwan. So you can, to begin with, you can use this kind of Taiwan Union Catalog to start your research. Yeah, this message.
Yeah, just there's an answer to Q&A. Yeah, so everyone can look at that. 大家还有别的回答吗？
那我提供一下，档案局它其实有一个机关目录查询网。它用这一个网路，它可以查到全台湾各个档案馆的资料，甚至到每一个地方政府的档案资料它都有。那如果想要知道，就是上国家档案的这一个首页，它就有些介绍了。它把全台湾的这一个，包括进史所、国史馆，甚至很多的这个中南部各个档案馆的这个目录，它都把它整合在一起。所以你只要从这个网站去打进你的关键字，不管是中研院国史馆还有各个机关的档案，你都可以找得到。但是你要申请的话，就必须要回到原来的档案的这个机构去做申请。对，补充一下是。
OK， 然后第二个问题 ，James Lin， 他的问题基本上还是刚才像丰原讲过。比如说这个外交档案，有的在国史馆，有的在进史所，有的在档案管理局，那背后有没有什么逻辑，还是完全就没有，就是历史形成的？
应该是说它没有什么逻辑啊，因为在进史所的外交部档案它是最早因为当时的外交部它就给进史所来典藏1928年以前的，那后来国史馆它又去收了1930年代。那有关于1950年代跟之后的档案，那当初是给档案管理局，但是中研院的进史所它是做数位化，所以说一部分的这个档案就到进史所去。那除了这3个机关之外，故宫也有外交部档案，有关于外交部的这个早期清朝的一个条约都在故宫里面，所以就很麻烦，你要研究台湾有哪些外交部档案，你可能要跑好几个地方。 但是你可以先透过我刚刚所提到的这个机关档案目录查询网啊，那目前国史馆跟进史所他们有很多的外交部档案已经是数位化，那用起来比档案管理局还要方便，因为档案管理局它毕竟就纸本，还要再做审核，就比较麻烦一点。那国史馆它已经有开放线上，甚至国史馆跟中研院的进史所他们都有合作，然后他们有2方面都各有对方的一个馆藏，所以要用的使用者可能就是要注意一下，台湾确实有这样的一个麻烦的一个问题。是的。
好，然后最后还有一个问题是Inja Tan 和 Wei Sung 他们问是他们都用过这些档案馆，说我们来台湾之前要怎么准备才可以比较充分的利用这些档案馆？
我来回答哦。那我想这个先要调查的就是像亚宏跟这个国史馆的资料，有一些跟档案管理局重复，那他们有线上档案，最好是以他们的优先，因为他们可以直接用你的 camera 直接去拍这些档案，就不用申请。档案管理局比较麻烦，他一定要如果没有线上的申请会等很久，我想常常有用过都知道，所以必须要把台湾有哪一些档案跟资料，最好你有一个熟悉度。那有重叠的、有重复的资料，就是以进史所跟国史馆优先，因为他们已经有很多都是线上开放。那档案管理局这边是还没有还没有完全的开放，所以可能就是有时候朋友们会来台湾会来看档案管理局的这些资料，那我都请他们先去跟进史所跟国史馆来调这些资料。但是也有一些我遇到的，就是有东京大学的老师，他来档案管理局看资料，他要的是南海的资料，我就请他赶快把它买下来，因为1张2块钱其实不贵，台币2块钱。好，那现在更方便，现在可以在美国，你可以透过线上付费，这些档案都可以寄到美国去。所以是非常方便。那当然了，这个是有数位化的档案，但是遇到没有数位化的档案，你可能就是亲自要来台湾一趟这个可能就是大家比较困扰一点的。是的。
Yeah, if it's digitized, you receive a CD-ROM, right? A CD disk. They're going to mail it to you. Yeah, at the cost of $2 new Taiwan dollars per page, which is very cheap. Yeah. 最后一个问题 Okay, the last question is about mainland research, right? One user is asking about early state building period land reform in Mao's China between 49 and 56. I think Xu An already partly answered this, right? 匪庭研究 that's one of the sources. But what else? 有没有其他的关于大陆的49后的档案？应该是比较少，除了匪庭研究之外，对吧？
对。
还有那个大陆工作组呢？国民党中央第6组是以前国民党党史会有，对吧？现在到哪里去了？
还是在党史馆吧？我记得在党史馆。对。
但现在不开放了嘛，对吧？
党史馆还是有开放，党史馆还是有开放，但是它不是每天开放，可能要查一下。对，它还是有开放的。
OK， 是哦。OK， 还有一个问题是关于大陆籍的学者，因为大家知道大陆籍就是大陆籍的学者，他们去这个国史馆现在是不能去了，是吧？那香港籍的可以吗？当然，政策可能还在变化之中。比刚才丰源回答说，大陆籍学者可以查询，但是他们是不能申请。
对，他们是不能来到台湾做申请的。这个是因为我们的这个档案管理局，它还是一个行政机构的一个思维，所以跟大陆还是有某种程度上面的一个隔阂。但进史所跟国史馆它其实都可以开放大陆学者。那你如果要用到1950年代以后的这些外交部的档案，进史所就有数位档，就不用跑来档案管理局。是的。
So his point is that there's some overlapping, right, between the Institute of Modern History Archives and the National Archives Administration. So there's some overlap. So you might get them from 国史馆或者进史所档案馆。Okay, there are still some questions, but we don't have time. We're out of time. So thank you everybody for joining us, and thank all the panelists. So if you have more questions, please write to them. You'll receive the email with the link to the YouTube recording recording today's talks, and also their PowerPoints and their email, so you can write to them. And Emily?
So on behalf of myself and Emily, I want to say a final thank you to everyone. You're definitely over time, but seeing how little attrition there is among the attendees, I think that everyone is like me, feeling inspired and motivated, not just to do this research, but to come visit Taiwan someday soon. Thank you to David for moderating, everyone, all the panelists for being both archivists and historians and models to us all and performing this great service to our field and our students. I also want to thank the Council for East Asian Studies at Yale, especially Stephanie Kim and Richard Sosa for providing all of the support and background for this event. And thank you to all of the participants for tuning in this evening. Please note that our next and final webinar in this series will be on Thursday, August 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern on the topic of academic jobs outside the United States. You will have to re-register for that webinar in order to receive the new link specific to the webinar. It's not the same link as this webinar, so we'll send that registration link in the chat. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, and thank you to everyone who presented today.
好，谢谢大家，谢谢诸位，拜拜。